Move your career further, faster, in just 2 days with a Harvard Professional and Executive Development Program. Advance your leadership skills, craft smarter business strategies, build your network, and transform how you work and think to keep your career moving forward. You'll earn a certificate and can add Harvard to your resume with Harvard Professional and Executive Development. Learn more at professional.dce.harvard.edu.
Frequency Podcast Network. Stories that matter, podcasts that resonate.
Alberta is in the red, big time. Coming off a year of depressed oil prices, the province is forecasting a deficit of more than $9 billion. Premier Danielle Smith says rising immigration rates is also partly to blame.
Throwing the doors wide open to anyone and everyone across the globe has flooded our classrooms, emergency rooms, and social support systems with far too many people, far too quickly.
An argument now setting the stage for a fall referendum on immigration policy and constitutional issues. This fall, Albertans will weigh in on 9 proposals that could change their province's relationship with the federal government. A possible 10th deeply existential question on Alberta's future in Canada could also be on the ballot. I'm Caryn Ceolin, and today on The Big Story, I'm speaking to Stephen Carter, veteran campaign manager in Alberta and president of Decide Campaigns, about the big questions Premier Smith is putting to voters and whether immigrants are being scapegoated in the face of a fiscal emergency. Stephen, it is a great pleasure to be speaking with you today. Thanks so much for making the time.
Thanks so much for having me. This is really going to be fun.
Oh, it is. I want to start with the referendum that Alberta Premier Danielle Smith has announced on immigration and constitutional changes, possibly a question on Alberta independence if that petition drive succeeds. You know, this is going to see the province consume itself until October debating those 9 or 10 questions, which frankly I wouldn't fully grasp, especially the ones on the Constitution, as I'm no expert. So what is the calculus behind posing these very specific proposals to all voters as a referendum?
Well, I think that's an excellent question. I mean, there's I think 2 possible answers. One is that this puts separation more into a positive light. So the Premier and her caucus and her right-wing backers, they are there's a number of them that are pro-separation. The estimate is there's about half of her caucus, and based on polling, over half of her members or her voters are pro-separation. So this is about the Premier putting it into perspective so that she has a strong mandate for her membership to vote for separation if she chooses to. The other way of looking at it is that this is separation light. Right. So getting more control over immigration, getting control over the Senate and eliminating the Senate. These types of questions that are kind of extraneous to anybody's real life. They're going to be asked and answered in a referendum that I think that most Albertans would have been quite happy not to have had.
How will this assortment of questions interact? Like, why couple immigration, Senate reform with a question on whether Alberta should separate from Canada? Like, is this all about unpacking some of those core issues behind the separatist sentiment?
Well, I think that she's got, we have to put ourselves into Danielle Smith's shoes. And when you've got such a powerful group of right-wing backers who want a different relationship between the province and the country of Canada, this puts her in a difficult position. And she's responded in the weakest possible way. By putting forward a referendum instead of standing up to those people and saying, no, this isn't actually what Albertans want. Albertans should be talking instead about what the healthcare system should look like. We should be talking about education. There's all kinds of questions about AI and what it's going to do to our economy. We have huge oil and gas revenues, but still a massive deficit. There are many, many, many issues that we could be talking about. And instead, the Premier has decided to allow her right-wing backers to dictate an agenda that I don't think that Albertans are particularly excited about. Now, having said that, there are a lot of people who are excited about separation. About 1 in 5 Albertans believes that separation is the way to go, and I'm concerned about that. I think that if we're not careful, that 1 in 5, like Brexit, turns into a 2.6 out of 5. And we sneak through a referendum where we didn't mean to or didn't intend to separate, but we wind up in a spot like Great Britain did with Brexit, where everything was promised and nothing delivered.
Is that a very likely scenario in your eyes?
Gosh, I don't know what's likely or what's not likely in Alberta. I mean, we did vote down a referendum recently about daylight savings time because we didn't like that it was going to be daylight savings instead of standard time. So there are chances that the Alberta population will grab onto something and say no to it. But at the same time, we passed a referendum on equalization, asking the Alberta government to open up the equalization argument, even though it's a constitutional discussion and we have no say. We had no say in how equalization is developed, and the current formula was, for the most part, created by Stephen Harper. So this is a challenge for us. We can be a little bit excited about stuff in the province of Alberta, and sometimes we can get it right, sometimes we can get it wrong. I also think that the referendum on the 2026 Olympics, we got it wrong. I was helping to run the yes side for the Olympics, and too much misinformation. There's too much, and there's so much misinformation now that I just worry that, there's organizers for the separation side running around saying we're not going to have any taxes. Not only are we not going to have taxes, Caryn, we're going to have a refund come from the province of or from the country of Alberta to every single resident of Alberta. So I'm terrified that the misinformation campaign could win more than the information campaign.
Do you think on the flip side, a referendum like this could take the temperature down on separatist talk?
No, I don't. I think that this is just like Quebec in 1980, where you start off with one referendum and then within another 15 years, 20 years, you wind up with a second referendum. And that second referendum was so much closer. We almost lost Quebec from Canada at that referendum. It created the Clarity Act. It created a number of different things that have come to stop such an outcome. But I don't think this provincial government, if we do have a question on separation, is going to run it through the Clarity Act process, for example. I think that this government, this provincial government, is dead set opposed to any federal intervention, regardless of whether or not it helps Alberta or hurts Alberta.
Do you say that because you've worked with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith in the past, and I suppose you know how her brain works?
I will not be so arrogant as to say that I know how her brain works.
Fair enough.
I really like Danielle Smith. I think that Danielle Smith is one of the most personable politicians you're ever going to meet. But I think that she learned the wrong lesson from 2014, 2015, when she was ousted from the leadership of the Wild Rose Party. And she wound up crossing the floor to Jim Prentice's PCs in an effort to hold on to the government. The lesson she seems to have learned is never anger the right wing of your party. And I think that the right wing of her party is now so far right that she has no business catering to them. But she is nonetheless. So I think that, Danielle, we all learn lessons from our previous experience. We all gain, experience. We gain strength from that. And I think that Danielle has just gained the wrong experience. Between that and being a radio host on Calgary Redneck Radio, I think that we're struggling to see the Danielle that I once worked with.
Is Alberta, asking to be treated more like Quebec, where its relationship with the federal government is concerned? Is that a bad thing?
It could be. It could be a bad thing. Let's take a look at Montreal in the 1950s. Montreal in the 1950s was the financial capital of Canada. It also had the opportunity to be the bridge to what became the European Union. But instead, Montreal is a city that struggles in no small part because of the referendum, because of the opportunity of separation. The chance of separation quelled any economic opportunity in Montreal and in Quebec in general. The average income in Quebec is 20 to 25% less than the average income in Alberta. By putting ourselves into a separation argument, we are at a very real possibility of minimizing our overall revenue opportunities. A landlocked country of 5 million people, you can find a number of them on the map. You can't find one that's thriving on the map. So my view, we want the things that Quebec has because Quebec has them, not because necessarily the best thing for us. Keep in mind that 2 years, with the immigration question alone, 3 years ago we were open to all newcomers, whether they were from Canada or from overseas. 2 years ago, Danielle Smith was sending a letter to the Minister of Immigration demanding more people be sent to the province of Alberta. And now 2 years later, we're having an immigration referendum where we want to control and curtail the number of immigrants coming to Alberta. And my view is, we don't have a mature enough government to have that kind of responsibility. And maybe Quebec doesn't either. But these are the challenges that we are bringing onto ourselves through these referendum questions.
I do want to ask you about the immigration proposals specifically, because while the big question may or may not be on separatism, immigration will dominate the ballot. I do have questions about the Premier's shifting stance on immigration too, but just for our audience, can you explain first and foremost what the Premier is asking the public to either affirm or reject where immigration is concerned?
Basically, it's about control, Caryn. I mean, it's basically, do we have control over our own immigration destiny? And the way that it's worded, you can almost hear the phrase, just like Quebec, added onto the actual question. Should we control our immigration destiny? Now, I'm paraphrasing it. It's a little bit longer than that. But that question really boils down to what the provincial rights are versus what the federal rights are. And in the province of Quebec, they have that right to determine their own immigration story and their own immigration journey. They get to pick and choose a little bit the immigrants that come to Quebec. I'm not sure that it's in Quebec's best interest to have that, but I'm not a Quebecer. I don't think it would be in Alberta's best interest to have more control over the immigrants coming to Canada. Or coming to Alberta. I think that we are blessed to have immigrants coming to the province of Alberta. If you take a look at the entrepreneurship numbers, the entrepreneurship numbers of immigrants is staggeringly high. The achievement levels of especially second-generation immigrants make a person blush how much they actually can achieve as immigrants who've been bred with a joy of being Canadian, a gratefulness to be in a country as open and wonderful as Canada is. And they achieve wonderful things. The second-generation immigrant tends to be significant business owners. They tend to be politicians. They tend to be leaders in our community. And we're asking for fewer of them, which doesn't make sense to me. We have so many wonderful immigrants in the province of Alberta. It does not make sense that we would be pushing back on that in any way, shape, or form. So I think that's the general sense of it, Caryn, is that we just want control.
The Premier has partly pinned Alberta's financial situation on what she called out of control immigration. To my knowledge, though, she offered limited clarity on the costs non-permanent residents put on the system, or how much could be saved if her proposed remedies were to be implemented. I mean, how much is immigration actually contributing to the problem where Alberta's finances are concerned right now?
Virtually none. Is the answer. I mean, we are educating an awful lot of children. I mean, for example, there are There's a school in Calgary that has over 70 different languages that are spoken as a first language. That is a burden upon the system. I will concede that. It is a burden upon the system, but it turns into such a wonderful outcome when people are integrated into Canada. The truth of the matter is that immigration is not the economic burden upon Alberta. The economic burden upon Alberta is that we have chosen to rely on our revenue resources, our resource revenues, as our primary means of funding government, and those revenues go up and down a lot. And ironically, they are as high as they have ever been, and we are still running a $10 billion deficit. That $10 billion deficit has nothing, underline nothing, to do with the immigration status of the province of Alberta. There can be a case made that we've let so many immigrants in that our housing prices have increased. Case could be made. But at the same time, they're the ones building the houses. They're the ones who are doing the work and owning the companies that are building the houses now. So many first generation immigrants doing the actual work of building our communities that we would be absolutely screwed if we were in a position where we were saying no to those people. And that's what Danielle Smith is saying is backed up by zero evidence, either being produced by Danielle Smith or her cohort of cronies that are around her that are trying to make the argument that in some fashion immigration is what's costing this great province, when in fact it's an over-reliance on resource revenue.
What would you say is the pretext in Alberta for this sentiment? Like, we know the public mood all across Canada toward immigration has changed. But, as you mentioned, just 2 years ago, the Premier wrote a letter to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau asking for greater allocations of newcomers who wish to become permanent residents. She expressed a goal of wanting to grow Alberta's population. I think it was to 10 million by 2050. Like, is this now just about passing the buck?
It's about passing the buck, and unfortunately, it's about kowtowing to racism. When you look at the people who are separatists, the separatists themselves ran a straw poll when people were coming to sign their petition. What was the number one issue that you were concerned about? Economic sovereignty, the provincial police force, the Alberta pension plan. It could be any number of things, and the number one thing by a mile was immigration and racism. Ultimately, the people do not like newcomers who are not like us. And it doesn't matter if it was Italians 25 years ago, Ukrainians 50 years ago. Immigrant waves are different people, right? 100 years ago it was Chinese. We object to the immigrants themselves. That's the problem. It's a latent racism that's not quite so latent anymore because the Premier has brought it to the forefront. And it pains me to say that, Caryn. I don't think that's I don't want that to be definitive of what and who Alberta is, but I find myself in the uncomfortable position of reaching the conclusion that the reason we're opposed to immigration is because the people who are now immigrating are not like us.
On the immigration proposals on the ballot, again, just to put a fine point on it, like, why wait another 7 months to hold a vote rather than, the Premier acting on things that are within her power right now?
Well, that's a great question. I mean, there is some action that is happening right now around the provincial police force that is not going to the referendum. Most Albertans, when polled, stand firmly with having the RCMP. But Premier Smith has pushed very hard to move from the RCMP to a provincial police force, and she's not waiting for a referendum to do that. So why the wait? Why would we be pushing off these 9 questions? And I think it has everything to do with the separation petition that's currently going on, the gathering of signatures. She wants to give the opportunity to finish gathering signatures and have the referendum date, I think it's October the 19th, have it already put in place. So all she has to do is add the separation question once it's gathered the signatures that she believes that they're going to gather.
You mentioned earlier in our conversation that Premier Danielle Smith is not the Danielle Smith you knew. And I just wonder, like, on a personal level, how you square that with the conversation that we're having today.
It's funny because people get elected and they change. They change and they try not to change, but there's very little way that you can remain the same, especially when you're the premier. I saw it with Alison Redford. I've seen it with Naheed Nenshi when he became the mayor, Jyoti Gondek when she became the mayor. I mean, there's multiple versions of this where people get isolated and they start to change the way that they behave. Danielle's an interesting case because she was leader of the opposition. She had a very strong position. She stood up for LGBTQ rights in a caucus where LGBTQ rights were under threat. And then in this iteration, she's anti-trans. In this iteration, she's not standing up and fighting for the underdog. She's instead being the bully, and that confuses me. Right? It's a fundamental shift that I'm confused by and disappointed in. And I think that ultimately, if Premier Smith were to call me up and ask, what my opinion is or where I stand, I'd probably say at this stage I'm just mostly disappointed. Like that sad parent thing when our parents aren't angry with us, they're just disappointed. I think that's kind of how I feel about Danielle Smith right now. She's taking the easy way out, and I will say I have a number of friends that are in her cabinet, in her caucus, and I'm disappointed with them too. People need to be standing up against this, not standing for it, and not standing idly by. This, I fear, is going to go the way that Brexit went, where we lose control and suddenly misinformation wins the day. And Great Britain has suffered immeasurably since that referendum.
How do you stop it from getting there?
That's the $1 million question. I don't have a clue. I had a group of friends over last night just to talk about this issue. What do we do? I'm not sure. We have a responsibility, I think, to stand up against it. I think we have a responsibility to stand up for immigrants because they don't have the ability necessarily to stand up within our system on their own. We have a responsibility to stand up for Canada. We have a responsibility to stand up for our Constitution. So I suspect that there'll be a group of us that do wind up standing up for it, standing up to oppose this premier. But that's really all we can do at this stage is to make a collective. We don't even know necessarily how the funding is going to happen. Will there be an official we side or a no side or a leave or remain? We don't have any of these answers. So what do we do is the $1 million question. And I hope that people pay attention as we slowly work our way through and find the answer of what we should be doing.
I'm sure it's a conversation that's unfolding at a lot of kitchen tables right now. Thank you so much, Stephen. Really appreciate your uniquely positioned insight and for making the time for this conversation.
Thanks very much for having me on.
And that was The Big Story. We'd love to hear your thoughts on this conversation. Send us an email at hello@thebigstorypodcast.ca. Reach us on Instagram at FrequencyPods or on Blue Sky at The Big Story. If you know someone who might enjoy this episode, be sure to send it to them. You can listen to The Big Story every day on the Seeker app or wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Caryn Ceolin.